Hi, it's Stephen here for the Idiot Quilter, and I was asked to do a video showing how I make my Halloween wall hanging project, this is one of the tiles in it, and I've been showing it off and on both on my vlog and here on the Idiot Quilter. And what it looks like is, here's one of the latest tiles that I've done, and eventually it all gets sewn together, and this is only half of it, into this kind of wall hanging. So you can see that it's a fairly intricate project, and each one of these tiles takes about 2 hours to do. So I'm going to film this all the way through, but what I will do is I will speed it up. I may stop occasionally to talk about what I'm doing, but essentially this is the pattern, and this came from Anita Goodesigns. It's called The Haunted Village. There are 16 tiles in this, plus sashing pieces, and principally it is done on your embroidery machine. And these instructions list the colors that you're to use. Now, one thing about Anita Goodesigns that I like is they use Floriani embroidery threads, and so the numbers correspond to the threads that I should use. Now, sometimes I don't have a certain color available, so I will substitute another color that is close. But I lay all my colors out in advance, and I have them all organized over by my sewing machine, and so they're ready to go. Now I need to hoop some things here, so I'm just going to move the camera down so you can see my hoop. And there it is. So it takes now I have a Janome 15,000, as you may know. So this is the hoop that it takes for this project. My machine tells me which hoop, and it's the SQ23. And I have put into this, I have hooped already 2 layers of no-show mesh. That is our base. However, I am going to take a piece of battleizer, and what this program will do is it will draw out a placement stitch so you'll know where to put down your battleizer. I don't worry about that. I let it do it on top of the battleizer because I find with my machine the thread is being pulled up from the bobbin and from the top thread much more evenly if I already lay down the battleizer. And I know approximately with this project how big a piece of battleizer I need. This is actually too big. I will have to trim it, and it's another thing you need for these is a good pair of applique scissors, and I will stop and show you how I do this when I get to that. The other thing I need is a sheet of tearaway stabilizer. Now, it doesn't necessarily call for this in the instructions, but I find it just gives me a little bit more stability. There's a lot of stitches in each one of these tiles, so I float this underneath the hoop, and that seems to work very well. I'm also going to need some fabric. There are 3 pieces in this particular tile. It varies. Some are just 2, some are 3, that I need for my sky piece and for my ground piece, and there's a moon in this one, so I need this. So these are just basically cut off pieces from scraps or large chunks, and it will draw out the design for placing these where I need to put them down, and then I'll have to do a little trimming with those again with the applique scissors. And when I get to those parts, I will show you that. But right now I want to set up my hoop into my machine and do the initial placement and tack down stitches. So I will be back with that. Okay, so I've got my hoop in place, my stabilizers floating underneath, I've got my battleizer on top of my no-show mesh, and the first thing I'm going to do in the program is draw out or stitch out the placement space for the battleizer. Now, normally that is supposed to be done on top of the no-show mesh, but as I said, I find that my stitches take better if I have the battleizer on top, and I already know approximately where that's supposed to be. So I'm going to start this and hope it catches okay. And it didn't. And that's normal. That happens at times. It thinks it's a thread break because the thread is out of where it's supposed to go. So I'm just going to very quickly rethread my machine, and we'll give this another try. Now sometimes you have to pull the bobbin out and put the bobbin back in at this stage, and this is why I like to use the battleizer on top, because I find it catches more readily. Otherwise you might have that problem. Now that's just a quirk maybe of my machine, I'm not sure. Also like to make sure it's over on the takeoff lever. It is. Let's try it again and see what happens. There we go. So it's just drawing an outline, sewing an outline, so I know where to place the battleizer. But as I said, I know where to place it. I've done enough of these now that I can definitely tell how much battleizer I need. Now I could have probably got away with a little less battleizer and saved some, but I like to have enough to cut away, as you're going to see. So it's done this initial outline. Now the next part of this is to do, and I'll just get my thread up from here. Didn't cut it. It sometimes does, usually it does, but this first stage is the tricky stage. And now it's going to go around twice on this, and that's called a tack down stitch. Now I am operating my machine at 700 stitches per minute. My machine will stitch up to 1,000 stitches per minute, but I'm operating at this speed because I'm most comfortable with that speed. Now you know I've had problems with my machine. They supposedly are fixed now, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go back into my past videos and you'll hear all about the trials and tribulations I've had with the Janome 15,000 Horizon embroidery / sewing machine. But right now those problems, I hope, are behind me, and it has been working very well, but don't say that too loud because you never know. So it's gone around twice, and this has got this piece of battleizer well tacked down. And now I'm going to take the hoop off. I'm not going to take this out of my hoop. You never want to do that. And I'm going to trim this. So I will do that. I'll show you. I'm going to move the camera around so you can see actually how this is done. So let's move my camera this way. And let's take the hoop off the machine. Remember, I'm not taking the hoop out of the holder. Oh, now you can see. Kind of got my stabilizer underneath a little uneven. That's okay. That doesn't give us a problem or anything. But I can just trim off the excess off of this right now, just so it's not in our way. This will all be torn away when this is done. So I'm going to take my applique scissors right here, and I don't know how well you can see this, but basically I'm going to follow this outside line all the way around and trim as close as I can without cutting that line, the battleizer off this. And that's why these duck-billed or applique scissors are great for this. So I just go in, line it up, and this is essentially how you cut appliques as well when the fabric is down, and I will show you that when the first applique is laid down. But you want to get it as close as you can to that guide piece. Now there's a little I need to trim off. I know my body is probably in the way of this. I'll just hold this up so you can see. So you see where I'm trimming it away. And I usually pull the fabric a little bit towards me as I'm trimming, and especially when you're using it with fabric as opposed to battleizer, it will sort of come away easier as you cut. So that's garbage. I know I could save that, but I didn't. And there's what I have right now. Now sometimes you get little pieces of things that you're doing. I just take a lint roller and take those off, and there's a little thread. So I'm going to mount it back into the machine, Okay, and I'll turn this around so you can see again what's happening. Oops. Now I'm following my instructions. My instructions are all numbered and tell me what to do next. So what I have done already is I did the squaring stitch and the tack down stitch for the batting. Now there's the placement stitch for the sky fabric, and that's an applique. Then it'll do a tack down once I lay that down, and then I have to trim it and carry on from there. So I'm using a basic black thread at the moment. Just put that there so you can see, because that's okay for tack downs and for outlines, because it'll get covered up by satin stitch in whatever color the pattern calls for at that time. So now we're going to place, this is the placement for the sky fabric. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my sky fabric, and I've already pre-cut a piece big enough for this. And I'm just going to lay it down over top of that outline. Now, I'm wondering how well you can see this. I'm going to see if I can adjust things here. There, that might be a little better. Okay, so I have my, oops, let's get that cut. Usually it cuts the thread, but sometimes at this stage it's hit or miss if it does it. It's not a big deal. So this is my outline here. All of this area will be what they call the sky. So I'm just going to, this is my sky fabric. Now on this pattern, they want you to leave approximately a ½ inch or more at the sides and at the top when you lay this down. So I'm just adjusting it, I'm just eyeballing it. That's so that when I trim it up to ½ inch all the way around, I will have enough fabric when it comes to stitching the tiles together. So that's about ½ inch there. Okay, so this is the tack down, and it's going to go all the way around twice. And what I'm doing now is I'm just sort of smoothing my fabric. Just to make sure there's no wrinkles. I press the fabric before I lay it down on here. You could give a little hit of spray starch or flatter or something like that, or Mary Ellen's Best Press if you wish. You don't want any tucks in this. Now it's going to go around and do this once again, and then I'm going to take it off the machine again. I'm going to cut this inside part out. I'm not going to cut the sides or the top because I want that overhang, so it'll give me some fabric when I put it all together to sew with, to get my actually a half seam allowance on this as opposed to a quarter seam allowance. And it should stop here in just a second. And so now I'm going to take it out, and I'm going to turn you around here so you can see again how I cut the fabric. So I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to use my applique scissors, and I'm going to cut only this inside part out. And I know my shoulder's in the way. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'm cutting as close as I can without cutting it, the sewing line, which is the tack down stitch. And what they mean by tack down, of course, is that simply that. It's holding down the fabric. Now, if by accident you do cut into one of those stitches, it's not a big problem because there will be a satin stitch over top of this eventually, and that will hold down the fabric. But it's advisable not to cut into those threads. Now, this can be, depending on your design, somewhat fiddly. So don't rush it, take your time. This is a fairly easy one to do. And you can see I'm pulling the fabric as I do this because that helps to get me right up close to the sewn line. Now you may say, well, could you not do this with ordinary scissors? Yes, but I think you'd find it very frustrating. These are designed so that they purposely, with this wider part on the scissor, don't cut into your sewn line. They're not a cheap toy to have, but definitely if you're going to do a lot of in the hoop applique, I strongly recommend that you get a pair. Now I've got some little threads. Now you find your fabric will fray a little bit by that line, and I find using the lint roller usually picks most of those up. If you have a few, you can just trim them away. They'll get caught in the satin stitch. So we're going to return this to the machine. And let me turn you around so you can see it better. And now, according to our instructions, we have a color change, and it's going to do some stippling on this piece. So I'm just changing my thread, and it's asking me, or it's telling me that I need 784. Now I don't have a 784, so what I am using is 785. Slightly different color, but not enough to give us any problems. So we need to thread this into the machine. It's nice to have an automatic threader. Okay, I am ready to go. Now this is going to do the stippling all in through here. So basically this is your quilting. Now it's not true quilting because I don't have all 3 layers on here. I do have batting, but I don't have any backing on this. But it's the nature of this particular project. As I said, this is going to be a wall hanging. It is not a quilt. It could be a quilt, but it's so dense with the amount of thread that it uses for each tile. It's just not. It's fairly rigid. It's not very soft and fluffy and you know, that kind of thing. So this is definitely a wall hanging when it is done. I will put backing fabric on it when all the tiles are sewn together to complete it. And I'll probably do a little bit of simple stitch in the ditch to go around each one of the tiles just to hold all the layers together. Normally that would be done by your quilting, by the stippling. But as I said already, this is not a true quilt. So I do want the layers though to stay together. So that's why I'll probably do stitch in the ditch around each square. So that on the back of this, it's just going to look like a series of squares. Okay, so it's done the stippling, and now it's time to move on to our next colors. Now the next color is telling me this is the tack down for the ground applique. So that works in the same way as the sky did. It will give me an outline, I will put my fabric on it, it will tack it down, and I will trim around it and move on. So from here on in, I'm going to put things on in fast forward. As I said, this project takes 2 hours to do. okay, for each tile. There's no way you want to sit through 2 hours of this. So I'm going to fast forward it for part of the way, and other times I'm just going to cut out a few of the steps because basically it works the same way throughout the whole process. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so we're just about done. It just has two little stars to finish up here. And then I'm going to take it out and I'm going to show you how we trim it up. So just one more star to go, and if you're interested, it is a total of 75,181 stitches, and it's taken just about 2 hours to do this. So here it's on the very last one right now. And that's it. All the stitching is done. Now I have to take it off out of the hoop and trim it up. So I will switch you around to see that. Just position the camera here. Okay, so now we can take it out. And before I remove the tearaway, actually I will remove the tearaway first. And you can see this is why it's called tearaway. It just peels right off. Now there is some of it embedded under this stitching, of course, and I'm not going to worry about that. That might eventually, if this was to be washed, would probably come out over time. But this will never be washed, and it'll be hidden, what little is there, by the background fabric. So now I'm just going to position you again so you maybe can see this a little bit better. Okay, there you go. So I have a black stitch line all the way around the perimeter of this. And I'm just going to take my ruler, and on my 1/2 inch mark, I'm just going to line that up on that line. And this is going to be my seam allowance when I stitch this together with the other ones. I'm going to go all the way around 1/2 inch. And as I said before, normally you would do a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but on this, the pattern calls for 1/2 inch. And I think that's a good thing, because I've already stitched some of them together, and I think 1/2 inch is a little bit better than a 1/4 inch. And so there we go. And we are done. And here's the finished product. So that means I've now done 12 of these, and I have more than 4 more to go. I've done 10 of these, sorry. Only 10. Gee, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So that means I have 6 more to go, plus the sashing pieces, and then I have to sew it all together and get the backing on it, and it'll be done. It's going to take a little bit of time. But now you see how this goes together. It's very easy. It is time consuming. And if you want to cut down on your time, make sure you have all your fabrics and all of your supplies, your threads, everything already organized and waiting to go. And most of the colors that are used in one tile are the same colors used in all the other tiles. So once you have them initially organized, you should be able to fly through this in less time. Okay, hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you again for another video on the Idiot Quilter. Bye for now.